And welcome back. Let's go ahead and do an example now of how to use bubble sort starting from the very end. So previously, of course, we had looked at this bubble sort algorithm, which is a very simple algorithm for us to use. And a lot of times when we are testing something and we just want, for example, to sort something, yes, we can use other more advanced algorithms, but a bubble sort is a great way to test it out when you just want to make sure like some kind of swapping mechanism is working before you, of course, advance to a more efficient or powerful algorithm. So with that in mind, let's just focus here on creating our own. So what I'm going to do is first get an array size from the user. So let's just go ahead and prompt them to do that. And then let's go ahead and make that array based upon that size. Now the next thing we're going to want to do, of course, is to fill that array. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, of course, want to fill it here. So let's just create a note that says fill array. And then what we're going to want to do is maybe to output the array. And then lastly, what we want to do is maybe sort that array. So let's sort it. And then we're going to output it again. All right, with those in mind, let's go ahead and tackle each of these pieces here. Now, I can, of course, do the coding directly in here, or I can create my own methods. I think just for some practice, let's go ahead and do some of these as our own methods. So let's just come down here and create a public. Let's just do it with a void call. And we'll call this one fill array. And what we want to do is pass in a int array, since we are using a integer up here. So I'm just going to call this int a, just so I can differentiate it. And all I want to do is say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than a dot length, I plus plus, and that should allow me to traverse that whole length of that array. And all I'm going to say is system.out.println, please enter the next value of the array. And I don't have to necessarily have this println statement here. I could easily have something that's just a prompt up here. But I think for our demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave this in here just so we can show that this is going through that loop. So then we just want to say that a of I, so that means every index value, will be set equal to kb.nextInt. Now notice I do have an error here. It says I don't know what kb is, and that's because the scanner is right now set to here. So I'm actually going to move my scanner so it is no longer restricted to the main here. But notice we do have some issues with it. All right, it says it needs to be static, so I'm just going to go ahead and click that and allow that to work. So there's just one thing you have to keep in mind if you're going to use the scanner class outside of the main. Now I want, of course, to come in and actually call this method. So let's just go ahead and call the method name. So fill array. And what are we passing in? We're passing in an array. So the array we want is R. And you'll notice it does give an error. It says, again, it's saying it needs to be static. So we're just going to go ahead and accept that we want to add that static modifier. So now that, of course, can fill that array, and now we can, of course, do the same thing, but we can do for an output array. And I'm going to make my life a little easier. I'm going to copy and paste this and change this from fill array to output array. And all I want to do now is take this a of I and put that inside of a println statement. So a of I. And that's going to simply output every value that's in that array. Now to do the sorting algorithm, again, we could do it here in the main, but I think what I want to do is call that outside of it. So I'm going to first add in this output array call here, so R. And I'm also going to copy that so it falls into the very last line of code. But to sort it, we need to add in our bubble sort. And again, I could just do a for loop here. So in fact, actually, I'll just start it off here. So let's say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than the array.length, so r.length, and do I plus plus. We can now go ahead and set this up. So if you remember, how this loop worked last time is we actually had a nested loop. So that is the key thing here when you're setting this up. So I'm actually going to, again, copy here, paste inside. I'm going to change I to J, because whenever you're doing a bubble sort, you always have a nested loop. One other thing you'll ever notice is that when we do this, there is an if statement here that's checking to see our values. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going ahead and close this now so we don't cheat here. We're simply just going to say if, and we want to look at those individual values. So we'll check at the array of j and see if it is less than the array of j plus 1. And then what that's going to do, of course, is allow us to check the next value in there. And if it is indeed less than, or if it's greater than, we can, of course, adjust this whether we are doing a search for something that is smaller or something that is larger, depending on how we want to do that sort. In this case, if I leave it as less than, that means I'm going to end up sorting it from largest to smallest. So I think for our purpose, we're going to go ahead and leave this in here. We are also going to need a int temp, and that is, of course, going to be our temporary variable that's going to keep track of all of our swap positions. Now, if we think about what int temp needs to equal, we want that to be the current position of our array. So we're going to use array of j. And then from there, we can go ahead and actually perform the switch. So we want the current position to be equal to the next position. So array of j plus 1. And then what we want to do, of course, is after we've updated that, we need to actually switch this by saying array of j plus 1 is then equal to our temp. And that should be all we need to do that. And of course, again, we can leave it here in our main, or we, of course, could create our own method that could handle that for us. Now, of course, I have shown this previously in its own method, so I think today I'm just going to go ahead and leave this here as its own little bit of code in the main. But let's just go ahead and test out, make sure we didn't forget anything here. But let's go ahead and just say an array of size 5, and let's go ahead and enter in some random values. And so I'll do 1, 9, 5, 4, and 3. All right. And notice I did get a rate out of bounds index error exception, so that means I need to check something here here with my loop. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. And if we look at my code, I realized I made a couple mistakes here. So first off, I have I here instead of j, so we need to, of course, fix that there so we can increment properly. And the other thing, of course, is if we look at this, we're going to array.length. And we don't want to go to actually the full length, because remember, that's going to run to an issue here when we do this j plus 1. So instead, we're going to do the length minus 1. We'll still be able to get all the values to sort because, again, we're going to look right here at this j plus 1. So now let's retest this, make sure that we don't have any errors. So I'll do size 5 again. Let's do 1, 6, 5, 4, and 9. All right, and so we got our unsorted array right here. And then you notice we now have the sorted one, 9, 6, 5, 4, 1. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and modify this just a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and make this a print statement here, and I'm going to concatenate that with a escape character for a tab. Just because that way it's a little bit nicer looking. And what I'll do is, just to make sure that we have a slightly different thing here, let me just add a system out of print line just so we can help separate those. So I'm just do a blank print line statement there and rerun this. So let's do 1, 6. Oh, helps if I actually use an array that's larger than 1. Let's do 5. There we go. 1, 6, 4, and 3. And how about 8? And so you can see my unsorted array is right here at 1, 6, 4, 3, 8. And my sorted array is 8, 6, 4, 3, 1. Again, that's going to be the exact same as what we saw here with our previous bubble sort, except the biggest difference is here we went smallest to largest. And in this version I have now shown you is how to go from largest to smallest. But that should give you a nice good setup for how to use bubble sort. Again, it's pretty easy, and there's a lot of really good applications that we can use. But again, bubble sort is not the most efficient, but it is one of the easiest ones to implement, as you can see here, because it's just 2 nested for loops.